Hey, we're live. Good morning, mediums. It's episode 41 of season 2. Welcome to live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with my two co-hosts, Scott Moon and Ralph Kern. And today, the best-selling author of the Extinction Files and the Origin Mystery series, AG Riddle, joins the show. Jerry has been writing and publishing since. Oh, you know what? I didn't write that down. What? Say it again.
Yeah, the first book came out March 2013.
2013. There you go.
That's awesome.
4 years.
And after that horrible intro, he's going to talk about his writing journey today on the show. Welcome, Jerry.
Oh, good to be here. Thanks.
I had this script all done. Actually, Scott had it done for me because he's a heck of a co-host, and there was a huge open blank space with since blank, and today he joined, and of course I didn't fill it in prior to the show, but that's par for the course here on Keystroke Medium. So
I helped just enough to cause a huge disaster. It's like you're like, just don't touch. Next time you're gonna be like, just don't touch anything, please. Thank you.
It's like my car's broken. I don't know what to do. Oh, I'll fix it. Are you a mechanic? No. Okay, go ahead. Let's see if we can do it.
But I do have a wrench.
That guy.
AG, it's a really good a good time to have you on the show. I'm really pleased that you had the time to come on and hang out with us today. I'm sure that all of our audience members knows who you are, but for the one or two readers out there that do not know who you are, would you please share a little bit about yourself and how you got started in writing?
Yeah, sure. So my first career was in internet staff for 10 years, and did okay in it, and I sort of saved up enough money to explore a second career, and reading is what I really loved. I mean, I would come home.
Are you guys getting some dropouts as well?
Yeah,
reading on the Kindle. Oh, am I dropping out?
Just a little bit.
Drop just for a second there. We started. Okay. We left off with you left off with reading. They're talking about your love for reading, and that's about where we lost you.
Yeah, so I mean, reading is what I really love. So for my second career, I thought, I'm going to write a novel, and if it takes off, I'm going to keep writing, and if it doesn't, I'll go do something else. And so it took me to write that first novel. It was the Atlantis Gene, and I released it, as mentioned earlier, March 2013, and it just kind of an audience and had a kind of a life of its own. I mean, the thing was very popular just after release, and then I wrote 2 more books in that series for the trilogy. I wrote a standalone Departure, which came out, I think, in 2014. Yeah, December 2014, and it sold a lot of copies, and Fox bought the movie rights, HarperCollins bought the publishing rights, and it came out in bookstores. And then so my new book, the ebook is out, and so the hardcover and paperback just came out this past week, and so that's I should say.
It's very cool about the movie deal. I have to say that you cut out quite a bit there on the while you were talking, but I think we got most of what you were saying.
So perhaps if we just summarise for Jerry, just because of the rate of dropout, you've been publishing since December 2014 with the Origin Mystery trilogy. Then you've moved on to a standalone, Departure, which you told us very excitingly. The movie rights have been bought up by, was it 20th Century Fox, you said?
Yeah, 20th Century Fox. Let me see if I can move around. I'm at my parents' house, and their Wi-Fi is a little. Let me see if I can get the connection to be better.
Okay, no worries.
Normally, that's my job with the Wi-Fi. I normally get the Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Have you gone and set up his mum's internet connection, Scott?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I'm set up in Jerry's. I'm up in Jerry's parents' closet,
stealing all the interwebs.
In the interwebs. So while he's doing that, we were looking at his first big book was the Atlantis Gene. Is what broke out, and I see there, if you're looking at it, The Atlantis Gene, a thriller, the origin mystery, book 1. It's got 14,600 reviews and a very high rating. So like you said, it looks like it really did take off and get a lot of traction with readers. The current one that I see on there is Pandemic, is one that's coming out, and that's got the orange stripy goodness also
Orange
from
stripy
Amazon.
goodness.
The bestseller orange stripy goodness. So, and I think I just put that on my wish list for Audible, or it's on pre-order, I think, on Audible, because I like the audiobooks quite a bit. So
well, we'll see if your internet connection is a little better now. I know everybody knows you for the Atlantis Gene. Your new series, The Extinction File, started. It came out. The first book came out in April. Second book's due out in October. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for the Atlantis Gene and what went into creating that? Obviously, at least 14,000 people liked it, and so you did something well. And we're really interested to hear what your thoughts on that book were.
Yeah, so the Atlantis Gene, I felt like when I started writing, it took me 2.5 years to write that book. Can you guys hear me any better? Is this
way better?
This is much better, much better.
Awesome at this point. So
okay, cool. Yeah, so I knew, when I started writing, I was not very happy with my output. I mean, I would read what I'd written, and I was just like, man, this is crap. So I probably wrote that book like 5 or 6 times, but I wanted to write a book that was kind of an intellectual journey, that was about something, and it was about history and science. I mean, those are two things that I really love, because I thought, I wasn't totally confident that I could write characters that were compelling or dialogue that was even serviceable. So, I thought if I can, put some science and history in there, there's something for readers. I mean, I love reading a book where I learn something. And the idea of Atlantis is something that's always fascinated me, this sort of myth about a very advanced civilization that's warlike, that, kind of collapses overnight. And I think, to some extent, we all kind of feel like maybe the world is kind of Atlantis-like, that we're maybe, and I think that's why apocalyptic fiction has such a draw, is, we're all kind of a little nervous that the whole world is gonna, that we're on the edge of a cliff somehow. But, so Atlantis was about this, big global conspiracy of people that were, trying to advance human evolution. They have this plan to do it, and they want to sort of take control of the human race.
yeah, that's an epic story premise right there, in lots of different ways. That the post-apocalyptic genre is very popular right now, and I think, like you said, there is those sense of uncertainty out there, and you kind of wonder how you'll do when it all comes to a head, I guess, is one interpretation.
When you originally set out to write the book, did you know that it was going to be a trilogy, or did you just set out to write that book and it took off and you were like, oh, I need to write some more in this? Or
I knew it was, I'd planned a trilogy, and I'd outlined, this was like the big arc of the story I wanted to tell. And I mean, I probably overplanned the first book, and I had a plan for the other two. When the Atlantis Gene got popular, I mean, I felt a lot more pressure to write that second book quicker. So, it was a lot of, stress. I mean, when I released the Atlantis Gene, it's totally homemade. I did the cover myself. My mom, who's a retired 8th grade English teacher, she, proofread and edited the book, and my wife read it. And so, after it became popular, I hired a professional editor, David Gatewood, and a professional cover artist. And so I was kind of redoing the Atlantis Gene, through that summer after the March release. And then I was writing the Atlantis Plague, which came out in December. And I mean, man, there was a lot of stress. I felt kind of like the urgency while this audience was there and enjoyed the book, and I didn't want to go too long. And I kind of feel it again because I just released a new book in a trilogy, and I'm, working on the second one, and it's nerve-wracking. I've always, like I told my wife, I was like, if I write another one, I'm just going to write all 3 books. I'm going to try to write all 3 books at the same time, and then just, instead of the stress will be off. But I don't know if it'll happen. I mean, this last one took me another 2.5 years, so we'll see.
I've noticed that one of the sort of surprising things, and I do mean this in a nice way, is the consistency in which your product has stayed up there. The Atlantis, the Origin Mysteries, and Departure. I mean, normally there's a massive spike, and then things disappear into the unknown. But it shows that the Origin Mystery trilogy and Departure really has captured the audience and maintained their interest and carried on growing. And I think that's fantastic that you managed to sort of really sink in with what people want there. Are there any sort of hints and tips you can give to anyone about who might want to?
Yeah, I mean,
follow in your footsteps.
Yeah, I wish I had some good advice. I mean,
all we want is we just want a magic formula that will guarantee us complete success overnight. If you can just prop that up, we'll be good to go.
Would you mind?
Everything will be fine after that.
Well, it's like the secret code in Contra, on the NES. We up, down. I can't remember what it was, but
up, down, left, right, A, B, select, start.
Nice.
You just happen to know it off the top of your head. Good job, Josh.
I just happen to know it.
Show, I'm going to email you guys which keys to push to maximize your KDP income. I got to press 4 at the same time, and it took me forever to figure it out.
So not Control Alt, delete.
It's
not Alt F4.
You're right. F4 is involved, but yeah. So I don't know. The book. My wife and I were talking about this the other day, and I was telling Hank Garner on his show. I was like, we every month especially in the past, because the book's been out for 4 years. The first one. I mean, every month after a while, we were just like, all right, this is it. This is the high water mark. I mean, there's no more readers out there for this book, and it's just going to fade off into oblivion. But I don't know what it is. Every month it continues to find new readers. And I'm not really sure if it's new people coming onto the Amazon platform and that book has like some appeal. I do think there's this universal sort of curiosity or interest in Atlantis. It's something they recognize, and perhaps it's just, genetics right now is such a big topic, and the marriage of the two is somehow appealing to folks. Or maybe, and I've also thought that, the book does cross genres. I mean, it's a science fiction novel that is very much a thriller, and it has this romantic arc that I think, it's got enough of, and certainly action adventure that, Clive Cussler and James Rollins type fans enjoy. So I tend to think that there's enough pull from all those genres to sort of amass, a small part of all of those audiences that becomes a large audience, when combined, or large enough for it to sustain, good visibility. And so, that's my theory. I don't know. And, it could be just that it has amassed so many reviews. And I think that it's becoming harder and harder to get a review number that high. And so when people say, oh, this must have been read by this many people, must be something to it, I'll give it a shot. And so I think,
isn't there a formula, if anybody can help me out on that? I thought it was something like, you can expect maybe every one of 100 people to leave you a review. And I'm not sure if that's the number. It seems like I've heard something like that.
That's pretty close, probably.
If you see 14,000 reviews, you can guess a lot of people. But it's not always the case, because some people just flat out don't leave reviews ever, depending if you're reading on your phone or do different things like that. So there is a lot of social proof involved with the book that's sold and maintained that type of momentum. But there has to be something to the story that's been appealing for 4 years, even when popular genres come and go and the hot new releases change so frequently, but yet somehow you've been able to maintain that momentum. So you
can look right now that the first one, the Atlantis Gene, is still 213 in the paid store, and it's in single digits for all of the categories. And after 4 years, it's kind of a phenomenal feat to be under 500 in the store. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, and for people who aren't into publishing in the details, what makes that impressive is there's literally, depending on who you listen to, a couple of thousand books a day that are published. So to stay visible and stuff like that with that many choices, because there's something for everybody in writing today. You can find your genre that you like, no matter how strange it is. We've gone into a few of those on other shows.
Yeah.
But there's something for everybody. So that's fantastic. We usually do kind of our writing craft a little bit later in the show. So I don't know if we want to talk more about just the books themselves and maybe some of your other series, or just kind of your writing journey some more.
I'd like to touch on Pandemic and then the new series too. Pandemic is a standalone, or not Pandemic. Yeah. No, Departure is a standalone.
Right.
And then you started another trilogy. What was the mindset behind the standalone book?
Well, I just finished the Atlantis trilogy, and it had been so, it was a huge challenge for me, obviously, because it was the first, series and books I'd written, and it took a ton of planning. And as I said earlier in the show, it was really stressful, and I did feel a lot of pressure to produce those books quickly, and I wanted them to come out for readers, and I wanted readers to be really happy. And one of the things, when you talk about getting that volume of reviews, early on, I would multiple times a day, I would go and read every review, and I was, getting a lot of feedback via email. But if you have a book that, finds a big audience, you start to get a ton of feedback. And I think, for me early in my career, it was kind of a double-edged sword. I learned a ton from readers. But as I went on, by the time I got to the third book, I knew that there were things that a ton of readers would not like. I was like, this is where I had originally planned for the story to go, and this is how I want it to end, and all this. And at the same time, I knew there were, a huge section of readers that would really enjoy it, and that's what they wanted. And so you sort of, it's tough because you have to make these choices about, where the story goes. And kind of like, sometimes you're better off just kind of burying your head in the work and just, telling the story. But I also think if you're out to get better, there's something about reading that feedback, and the challenge becomes, what to take to heart and what to, just leave on the table more. And so, with Departure, the mindset that I had was I want to write a standalone book where I can just, write a one and done. I have this story planned out, and something that would really require less planning, and for me would just kind of like fall in love with writing again and really get back into it. And so I had this idea, this premise about this flight that takes off in the present day and crash lands in the future. And so it's a bit of a spoiler there, but and the idea was, I also wanted to challenge myself in the sense of doing something that was a little more character driven. Atlantis and Pandemic to a certain extent are very plot driven. They start with these events that are, so much bigger than the characters, and you have a lot of characters and a lot of POV. And so Departure is really about these people trying to survive and unravel this mystery about, what's happened to us and where are we. And so that was fun for me. And when I released it, a lot of readers said, I was hoping for something, because the other side of having a really successful book is that readers, they tend to kind of want the same book over and over. I used to never understand why, Lee Child and Dan Brown and Clive Cussler write, kind of the same, because I love a lot of, I read a variety of genres, and I love, these big epic stories that, kind of combine, these elements of adventure and thriller and mystery and science fiction, romance. But that was really instructive. Departure was a fun book to write, for one, because my wife and I were traveling in Europe for 4 months. So we got to go to a lot of places in the book. We went to Stonehenge and Gibraltar, and additional spoilers there, but I always do my after I drop the spoiler. So I drop the spoiler, and then I'm like, by the way, that was
Josh, get the bleep button out.
It's not really an alert. It's not really a warning. It's kind of like, just so you know. But yeah, so I'm curious about that. You talked about that. Is there with all your fan feedback and it's coming to some of those expectations? Well, two things I want to say before I forget is that it's interesting that you talk about how stressful it is to that the pressure you feel to keep doing that. And it's interesting that people that are just starting out and people that have been very successful all still, because, you know, looking at it from like our point of view, we're like, well, it must be easy for him. He knows he's going to just kill it because he's got all these fans. So that's interesting. I wanted to mention that. But the other thing is, with your fan feedback, are there deal breakers that you have identified that this is, I can do anything I want in my style of fiction, but this is something that fans won't tolerate?
Well, maybe. I mean, there's the one thing I've kind of figured out is that, you know, there are these lines within the genre. You know, there's these science fiction readers who will read a hard science fiction novel that is, you know, based in fact, but the minute you do something that they can't imagine actually happening, so the introduction of aliens or the introduction of time travel, then they're like, okay, that's it for me. And even in, spoiler alert coming here.
First.
You know, I'm learning another craft here today. But in Departure, you know, there's a time travel novel. You know, time travel is explicitly kind of explored, even from a scientific standpoint. And, you know, it's about time dilation and the fact that, you know, on the International Space Station, you know, time moves at a different rate than it does sitting on the surface of the planet. But, you know, I get emails from readers that are like, you lost me there. You know, that's the place I can't go. In Atlantis, which, spoiler alert again, has aliens, people are just like, that's where I sort of got off the ride. So you know, the one thing I've learned is that I do think it's important in the first book in a series to kind of set the boundaries of what's possible in the world. And then you kind of play within those lines, because I think for some readers, if they sort of go in and they say, okay, this is kind of the boundaries of reality in this fictional world, and then you change the boundaries in book 2 or 3, it perhaps upsets some people. And the other side of the coin is that if you want to push the envelope and really surprise people and, you know, blow their mind, you know, sometimes you've got to do it. But those are the things I agonize about a lot.
Has
like
that
old adage about if you're going to swear, make sure you do it in the first page, so people know it's coming.
Yeah.
Has that affected your like for instance, the alien thing in the Atlantis series, where people got to there and they're like, nope, I'm out, I don't like aliens? Has that affected the writing that you're doing now? Are you looking at that and saying, if people read this, are they going to be out, or are you just going to go and write the book that you want to write and hope that people like it?
I think it's a balance between the two. I mean, I'll say that I've certainly become more mindful of it, and it gets a little agonizing at points, because you're just like, man, you know, this is kind of what I want to do, but I know a ton of people won't like it. But at the same time, it's like I have, you know, in terms of planning my series, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do with Pandemic and the Extinction Files is really try to write something that was, you know, super realistic, and that people could just kind of buy and say, oh man, that, you know, I could see this happening. I mean, in all of, you know, in Atlantis, there is this pandemic aspect, and we see the sort of precursor events, and we see the aftermath of this pandemic. And then in Departure, we see, you know, the very, very far future of a pandemic that had happened in the past. And so what I wanted to do with this new book was more of where my other books were a little more fantastical and science fiction. I wanted to do something that was more Michael Crichton-esque, in terms of, this is a, you know, almost a hard science fiction novel that is about, you know, CDC employees that are really at the genesis of an outbreak, and they've found something that is moving quickly and that is overwhelming the local health professionals, and it's just spreading around the world. And you see the pandemic as it is catching fire. So it certainly, to write a novel like that, you know, when I looked at the elements of it, I did, in my original outline for the Extinction Files, I had this aspect of alien technology and stuff that was coming in, but I was like, you know, I think I can make this series just as good if I take that out. And I don't think it adds enough to leave in. And on the other side, I'd already kind of done the whole alien thing in the Atlantis series, so I wanted to do something completely different. So, well, yeah, I would say it definitely has affected my writing. I don't know if my writing has gotten better because of it, but it's definitely, yeah.
Well, you can tell that people are not. I don't want to say not
Turning
picky.
their nose up, are they? They're not
No,
turning their
because
nose up.
yes, because you look at Pandemic right now, and it's been out since April, and you're number one in every category and 29 in the Kindle store with over 300 positive reviews. It's got a 4.6 average, which is extremely good for a book that's only been out for what, 2 months. So congratulations on that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, when you work on a novel for 2.5 years, I mean, and when it comes out, I was just chewing my fingernails. Like, what are people? I mean, I sent it out to like 100 beta readers, and the feedback was really good. But the novel is 700 pages. I mean, so it's like one of the hardest things was, I released it and then nothing happened for a few weeks because I think it took a lot of people that much time to read that book, and then the reviews started to come in, and I was a little more relieved. But
it's probably hard to get the people that read a book a day may not read a 700-page book a day and do a review.
Yeah,
I think most people would struggle with that, wouldn't they?
Like, I usually read a book in a day or in an evening, and they're like, man, you kept me busy for all week, or it took me the whole weekend to read it. And
which is a good thing. My oldest son is a huge reader, and I learned at a very early age that I can't keep him in books. So I'm like, he'd read those giant Space Marine omnibuses that are like that thick, and he'd like read it in 2 days. I'm like, this is going to get expensive.
He's reading House and Home.
Yeah. Concerning the length of Pandemic, Preston Lay asked, did you consider breaking it into 2 parts, the first book, or keeping it 700 pages when you finished the book? You knew it was going to be a monster. They talk about science fiction and this post-apocalyptic or thriller series that's super long. Did you consider breaking it into 2, or always you kind of had it as this is going to be one epic book?
Well, I did. I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's something that came up. So, I mean, my process is, I write the draft, I do my edits, and I do a few rounds of edits, and then my wife reads it, and then I send it to these alpha readers, and these are like retired editors who just read for fun, and so there's 3 of them, and 2 of them said, this is the best thing you've ever written. It's amazing. And then one of them was emphatic, said, this book is too long, and this, the problem with it is that you got to break it into 2 parts because you have so much backstory. Once you get into the novel, you've got to try to balance this pace with this, this pandemic that's consuming the world, and you're telling the story of these characters who are trying to battle the pandemic, and those 2 stories are moving at a different velocity. And so, I mean, I took her feedback to heart, and so then I sent it to David Gatewood. I actually cut out. So the book was 190,000 words when the alphas got it. And so I cut out maybe 50 or 60,000 words. I didn't quite cut it in half because I didn't want to, I needed the ending. I liked the ending, and that's where I wanted to get to. And so I sent it to David, and he was like, I think it's okay. I mean, it's a good book, but, show me what you cut out. And so then he read what I cut out, and he was like, man, this is the heart of the story. I mean, this is the emotional engine of the story is what these characters went through in their past that's kind of coming back up as they battle this pandemic. And so then, I faced the decision. I was just like, you know what? I mean, I think this is the story I originally wanted to tell. And I looked on my bookshelf, and I was like, these Tom Clancy and Robert Ludlum things are just huge too. Maybe I'm okay. I don't know. But I feel like it is a learning experience. I mean, the question is, the market's changing, and I think attention spans are contracting. And, I like to think that of those 700 pages, I mean, it's well paced, it's all story, and it's still moving at a pretty good clip. But I think time will tell, as I think the people who are reading it now are my core fans. But as we go on, towards throughout the year, and so these people that don't know my work start reading it, I think it'll be interesting to see if they say, hey, this was too long. And I've gotten some reviews that said, this. the book was too long.
And maybe I missed
I
that.
think-
How does that compare and link to your other books?
Okay, so the Atlantis Gene, my first book was 132,000 words. So I mean, it was a pretty long book. I mean, but Pandemic is roughly half, 50% longer. The Atlantis Plague, the second book, was about 112,000 words, and then the Atlantis World was about 80,000 words, and then Departure, I think, is maybe 90,000 words, something like that.
So they're all
one of the interesting things you were saying is sort of how you've kind of mined your reviews to a certain extent to be able to write to market a little bit, and then you kind of also said, but I'm doing my own thing, and I think that's both a brave and great thing to do, to keep your own sort of writer personality out there. Would that be a fair comment to say you've sort of balanced those two aspects?
Yeah, totally. And I mean that, I think the balance there kind of depends on where you are in life. I mean, I think if I was writing, books of poetry, that weren't commercial fiction or something, maybe I would lean a little more towards writing the story that I wanted to tell and having the content be exactly what I wanted. But what I'm doing now is, I'm writing stuff that is intellectually stimulating to me, topics that I'm interested in, and stories that I'm, kind of the kind of stories that I want to read. And then, once I write them, it's like that editing process. I then adapt what I've got, and I do, work on it at the outline stage, but I adapt what I've got to what I think readers would want to read.
John L. Monk asked a little bit ago when we talked about these big books and this big epic kind of cast of characters that you have. He wanted to know your thoughts on glossaries, either in the book in the front or the back. Is this something that you do, or if you don't, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great question and a great thing to do. One of the things I did with the Atlantis Gene is I did Amazon's X-ray feature. And so one of the first emails I got when Pandemic came out was, is there going to be an X-ray edition? Will X-ray be added to Pandemic? They just said, there's so many characters, I'm having a tough time. I mean, even got an email the other day from someone that said they had to write out, the family tree of all these people. And I think it is tough. And I've considered adding that, to the back or to the front. I think the challenge for readers is when they need to know the information, it needs to be very easy for them to flip to it. So I haven't quite figured that out. I mean, that's the cool thing about X-rays. I mean, they can highlight Dr. Peyton Shaw, and it says, who she is and what her role is. But it was tough for me to keep. I mean, sometimes it's tough for me to keep track of. And I was writing the novel, so I was like, man, I got to simplify this for readers. They're never going to get it. But some readers love that kind of stuff, and some are just like, man, you gotta really simplify this thing.
I know when I was reading, I think it was the Abyss Beyond the Stars. It was one of Peter F. Hamilton's Commonwealth novels on Kindle, and he had the X-ray feature in that. And I have several favorite characters in that series, and you can open up this big X-ray thing, and it would show you in the book where the characters were going to come in at the book and how long they were going to be a part of the narrative. And you're like, oh, I got to get to that part, and I got to get to this part, and I got to get to that part.
Oh, it's just cheeses, that is.
I know. I'm like, I want to read that one.
This will be a great segue for your question, Scott. The question you always ask
about characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Jerry's watched much of the show, but a question I like to ask is, do you have a non-primary character who's your favorite to write, or who you really enjoy writing?
Yeah, in Atlantis, there was like this computer geek named Josh Cohen, and he was one of my favorites. And Milo, who was this Tibetan monk, is kind of a secondary character who I really liked. And I don't know, sometimes, I mean, it's, as I write the books, I try to follow my outlines, but at some point, a lot of it gets rewritten. And secondary characters, in the books who, I just were kind of they just serve a role and we're going to go off scene, become more important characters because I like them and I think they're more interesting. So in the most recent book, Pandemic, I have, a series of CDC employees. And so they go to Kenya to investigate this outbreak of what they think is a hemorrhagic fever that, looks like Ebola. And so some of the doctors and the CDC employees, Hannah Watson and Norman Thomas, there was more chemistry between them and they were more interesting than I thought. And so I intended to end their story arc in Kenya, and I actually carried it through, all the way to the end of the book. And you see there sort of the dynamic between them resolved. And so that certainly happens a lot. I mean, that to me is one of the most fun thing about writing. I mean, the kind of books I'm writing, I have to plan out a lot and you have to outline. And for me, it's not, that's not tons of fun, but the act of writing, and then when things surprise me and when characters do things that, I didn't plan. I mean, that's the fun stuff. And so, yeah, I always grab a hold of that when I find a character that I really get into, I think, maybe readers will too.
Yeah,
that's a writer's prerogative, isn't it, to bring him forward a bit. And
yeah.
One of the things I recalled about Departure I really enjoyed was sort of the set of really strong characters. And I don't know, spoiler alerts, it looks like you had the opportunity to play with them perhaps a bit more than perhaps in any other kind of genre that it could possibly do. And it was very much an ensemble cast, as I recall, wasn't it? So it sort of focused on just a few characters, but there's stuff that goes on which makes them more than just a few characters. Is that spoilerish enough?
So how many points of view do we normally think, or I guess two-part question is how many points of view do you use, or alternatively, how many points of view would you recommend writers to use for a kind of a thriller type sci-fi novel?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that if you ask traditional publishers or editors, they're going to tell you that one point of view is really the right number. And if you want to write commercial fiction that is really successful, if you look at, Brad Thor's, Scott Harbath novels, I mean, those are single point of view. I mean, Reacher obviously is predominantly one point of view. So, but for me, I think that the story becomes richer with more points of view. I think it becomes harder to read with more points of view. And I think that the risk is that you diminish the reader attachment to the primary character. So, one of the things I did in Atlantis is it was mostly 3 points of view: the point of view of our heroine, the hero, and then the antagonist, the bad guy. And so, what I wanted to do with Departure was to kind of narrow that. And so we have this alternating, our hero and the heroine tell the story. And I think what's so interesting about that novel is that they interpret events very differently. And so they're in this very high stress situation where, the planes crash and they're trying to save these people that are drowning, and they're, trying to just stay alive. And so they have a different perspective. And I think that makes it more interesting. And then they get separated and they're dealing with different things. And so you're seeing the action from 2 points of view, but it's still really close because it's a first person point of view and you're rooting for that character. But I think if you're writing, to find your audience and success, I think that you have to trust your instincts a little bit. I mean, there are these novels like, George R.R. Martin's Song of Fire and Ice that is just like tons and tons and tons of POV. I mean, you might, just like the Peter F. Hamilton, you might see this character once or twice in the whole 700-page novel, and it's like that's probably not enough, for main, sci-fi or thriller. But I think 1 or 2 is probably a good place to start if you're starting out.
Until you get more comfortable with writing multiple.
Yeah,
probably.
I mean, Pandemic has probably too many, honestly. I mean, the Pandemic is primarily, our hero or our heroine, but I mean, I bet there's probably scenes from 7 different POVs that you see around the world. So,
wow,
yeah.
I want to kind of move into the kind of mechanics and process that you use to do your writing. I want to note really quick here before we move on to that this episode of Live is sponsored by the great folks over at Sci-Fi Bridge. Sci-Fi Bridge is dedicated to bringing you exclusive deals, new releases, and other exciting news from your favorite sci-fi authors straight to your inbox. In order to celebrate the Bridge's recent launch, its captains are excited to bring you the fourth massive book giveaway. There are free prizes available to all who enter between May 20th and May 27th. If you're listening live, you have 5 days to enter the giveaway. There's a chance for 5 winners to receive 30 ebooks from sci-fi authors. There is one grand prize winner that will receive 20 signed paperback copies from bestsellers like Will McIntosh, M.D. Cooper, and you will get the full Ganog series by Chris Fox, who we just had him on the show a little while ago. If you're interested in this giveaway, head over to www.scifibridge.com. Check it out. I am in the giveaway as well, and you will receive 2 of my signed and numbered paperbacks because the paperbacks that I'm doing are no longer in print. And so they are special edition, super cool.
Worth millions.
Eventually they will be worth millions of dollars. So go sign up for your chance to win $1 million book from me, and get signed up at Sci-Fi Bridge. So go ahead. You mentioned that your books are, your cast of characters are vast. Your books are longer books. Can you talk about what you actually go into writing it? Do you use like Scrivener or Word? You said you plan exclusively. How long do you plan, and can you tell us a little bit about your process?
Sure. Yeah. So I start with this kernel, or like this sort of idea, this kind of question that intrigues me, and then I longhand in a notebook, I'll write out my outlines and I'll write out my character bios, and I do that just to minimize distractions because with the internet and all that, it's very easy to get distracted. And so once I do that, I'll go and I'll buy some nonfiction books and do some kind of like basic the science or history research, and then I'll look for popular articles. I mean, because the books I'm writing are techno thrillers, I kind of start with the instincts about what I'm interested in, but I've found that looking on like Discover magazine or these other, I'll like Google these topics and I'll see what articles have been written and what the take has been, and then I'll look at a few things to try to get a sense of what the general audience or the public is kind of interested in within these aspects. So, and then there's some more research that I'll do, like for pandemic, for the CDC segments of the book, I couldn't really find a good book that was about investigating outbreaks because, it changes so much. And so what I relied on were YouTube videos of these EIS, these CDC employees, talking at conferences or, other nations where they were trying to build capacity, where they were talking about the actual process of what it was like. So that's the research part. And then when I actually write my books, I use a Neo writer. And so, these are just like basically a digital typewriter. It, holds about 3 or 4 lines. There's no internet access. And so I write my drafts there, which is cool because there's no squiggly underline when you misspell a word. I'm a terrible speller. And that's a huge help to me. And so then I import from the Neo to Scrivener, and then I do my edits in Scrivener, and then I export to Word. And then once it's in Word, that's what I use for the alpha read, and then with David Gatewood. And then when I send it out to beta readers, I actually use, Kindle Gen, and I will take the Word output into HTML and make a actual Kindle file to send them.
It's what would you call the Neo?
It's a writer. It's by Alpha Smart, and you can buy these things on eBay for like $15. And
wow, I'm just Googling them, and I was like, wow.
My wife and I were trying to explain she was going back to school a while back, and we're trying to explain that we didn't have emails. and that she had a typewriter that just had a little tiny word processor on it. And
Yeah.
we're like, what are you talking about? I thought we were making stuff up, but apparently things come back.
Yeah. Well, they don't make them anymore. It's just, and you're right, it's mostly these kind of digital typewriters that they had in schools that they never really caught on. And I mean, I bought a lot of, like, I don't know, 20 of them because I figured they're going to break at some point in my career. Just like sitting in a closet. But there's another one, an Alpha Smart Dana, DANA, and it has a bigger screen. But anyway, it works for me.
Just for the people who might be watching that not Googling, they're basically like a keyboard with, it looks like a calculator screen across the top. It's
like a dot matrix screen.
Amazing that you're writing pretty much a whole novel. It's about 700 pages.
And there's apps. There's apps you can get, I think, to block off the internet, and then you can go George R. R. Martin and write it in WordStar or whatever. Like one step up from DOS. I think,
is it hard for you to keep track of what you're doing on that device, or do you just sit down and write what's in your head, basically?
Well, I have my outline, in the notebook longhand, and I got my character bios, which I write out longhand. And so when I sit down at the Neo, it basically has 8 files, and you can hit Control W to see how many words you've got in the current file. So that's kind of nice because I'll do 1 chapter per file. And so, I try to pace my chapters to be, 1,000. I try to do 1,000 to 2,000 words. So as I'm going through it, that's the way I write my draft. The Neo is terrible for editing, which I try to do on it sometimes, but it's good for just, getting the story out. And so I'll generally write like, 5 or 6 chapters and then import it to Scrivener. And then I see all the, like at the end of the day, I usually write in the morning when my mind is fresh. And then by the afternoon, I'm pretty tired. So I will return fan mail and waste endless amounts of time on Facebook and then, import my output and try to edit it.
A little bit ago, Preston Lay asked about word counts. When you started out with Departure, knowing that it was going to be a standalone book, did you have a total word count in mind? Like you want to hit 100,000 words and that's your goal? Or do you just kind of write the story and see how many it turns out to be?
Yeah, I just write it and see how many it turns out to be. Although I did feel like, 80,000, I wasn't sure how long I was a little scared that Departure would come in under 80,000 and that people would be like, this is a little too short. I really wanted a little more meat, but it came in at 90. So it actually came in at 100, and then I cut it down to 90.
And so when you go through this, your trilogy, the Extinction Files, you have book 1 out, book 2 is coming in October. Obviously, there's going to be a 3rd book at some time. Is that when you sat down to plan that series out in your notebooks, did you do all 3 books, the whole series out before you started book 1?
Yeah, I did. I really wanted to know, for me, like the thing that scares me the most about this whole job is that I could get to the end of the book and not have a really, really solid ending, and so, and the same for the trilogy. I want to know that ending is there and that it's, going to blow people away and that's solid. So my goal for the rest of the books in the series are for them to not be 700 pages. I don't know how long they're going to be, but maybe 4 or 5.
And the way you sort of branding the Extinction Files, it's almost like, are they going to be separate separate pandemics or separate extinction events, or are they one continuous?
Well, that's one of the
trilogy?
things I want to explore. Yeah, when I set out, I thought I've got this core trilogy, and the Extinction Files is really about this group of scientists who are trying to save the human race from themselves, and they all have this idea of what that technology could be. And so you have these competing kind of global scientific experiments, and so all with the intent of saving humanity from extinction. So one of the things I've thought about doing, and I don't know if it'll happen, is writing this core trilogy that's about defeating the most sort of the biggest scientific cell that has the best plan, and then there could be these standalones after that of where they're pursuing these other, conspiracy cells and operatives and who are trying to do their own kind of extinction, what they call looking glass projects. But I don't know if I'll do the standalones. I don't know what will come after this trilogy, but I've given it a little thought.
Am I right in saying with the Origin trilogy, the Origin mysteries, did that go to Kindle Worlds?
It did.
As well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how did you find Kindle Worlds? What was your involvement? How did you, did you enjoy sort of having other people write in your world, or was it like, that's mine, damn it, leave it alone?
No, I think the coolest part about that was getting to meet the other authors and to see what they wrote. I mean, and a lot of those stories, would appear on the Atlantis Gene and the Also Balts, really highly ranked. Steve Conkley wrote a really great story that a lot of readers have enjoyed. Nick Thacker wrote a story that became very popular, and it was overall, it was really positive. I would certainly do it again, and it was pretty cool.
What do you have? You have to finish the last 2 books in your trilogy. Do you have anything more planned for this year?
I don't know. I think I'll be pushing pretty hard to get that done. My wife just gave birth to our first child last September, so we got an 8.5 month old at home, so that's we got our hands full with that.
They're game changers.
Josh just had a similar experience. You messed up your entire workflow. Not him personally. I think his wife actually had the experience.
Yeah. Oh no, I experienced it.
Experience of pain.
There is some workflow changes that have to be made.
Yeah, I noticed that Pandemic is not out on Audible yet. Do you have plans for? Oh wait, maybe it is.
Yeah, I think they're recording it now. Audible bought the rights. Audible actually bought the rights to the book before I'd even started drafting it. And they're going to do the whole trilogy. So I think it's out June 30. I'm going to try to get the second and third books for like the Audible, the paperback, and the ebook to come out at the same time, but I didn't quite happen this time.
It's going to be a huge vote. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just going to just really wanted to sort of touch on sort of, I suppose, the last big topic that came. Well, one of the last big topics came out of your book, Departure, and the movie rights. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit and how it came about, and when are we going to be able to enjoy it in the cinema?
I don't know. I don't know when it's going to be in the cinema. That is anybody's guess. But when I sold the Atlantis Gene rights, I didn't have an agent for books or for anything. And one of my neighbors was an entertainment attorney, and he helped me kind of negotiate it, and we did it. And so by the time Departure came out, I had, an agent for foreign rights in New York and an agent for foreign rights for Asia in Taipei. And then I had gotten an agent in LA to do film and TV rights. And, when Departure came out, he was like, just the agent in LA said, keep me posted on the sales. And in about 3 months, it had done like 250,000 copies. And so he then started submitting it to studios. And they called me up with the offer, with 6 figures. And I was like, hey, it sounds amazing to me. And so it wasn't really a lot to think about.
Yeah.
You got my attention.
And it was, with 20th Century Fox, who I think would do a great job. And so I don't know. Hollywood for me has been a bit of it's just kind of a crapshoot. They option rights, and then sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. So I just hope that, at some point in my career, something gets made. I think that would really be a blast. And I've told my agent, I was like, I don't, the money's good and I think it's important, but I really, like, with whatever deal we do with the Extinction Files, I really want to sell it to somebody that has a high chance of of making it. That's what I'm really after at this point.
Yeah, you just put that on my bucket list. Get my book made into a movie, and then
Well, it sounds
I
like
want to go see
I want
to go see the Grand Canyon. I want a bowl of Perfect 300, and I'd like to have my book made into a movie. If I could just make those three things happen, my bucket list would be all done.
Well, it sounds like it's got a high chance of actually happening, doesn't it? So that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I did want to ask one more question to make sure I fit it in. Obviously, it doesn't have to be the last question, but it's one I know people like. And so, if is there anything you knew, did you know now that you could go back and give yourself advice? If you go back and say, okay, knowing what I know now, I would do this differently or something in the past.
Well, man, I don't know how much more time we've got here, but
all the time in the world, buddy.
all right, here we go. No, the thing that I would tell myself when I first started this would be, instead of my homemade route that I did with my first novel, I made the cover or my mom edited it. I would try to go professional as much as I could with that first presentation. I would have hired a cover artist, and I would have hired an external. I mean, I would have still had my mom, read it and give me her notes, but I would have hired a professional to do it. I think that, and it doesn't have to cost a ton of money. I mean, maybe it's just a proofreader or somebody like that. But I think that the market these days really demands a pretty polished product. I think expectations, they seem to just go up every month, what readers really want. I think I would also tell myself maybe to stress less. I mean, it's in the career that I had before writing, we had a pretty small internet startup, and it was a fast-paced, high-stress environment, but it was a different kind of stress. I mean, you could sit in a conference room and say, this is my idea for what we're doing, and this is the direction I think we should take the company. And you could sit there and debate, and you could say, this is why I think you're wrong, or this is why I think we should be doing this or that. And at the end of the day, you go home and, you care, but it's not like, it's not like a deep, deep part of you. But I think that writing is something that, I mean, all of these characters and all these ideas come from you, and they come from some part of you. And I think if you write a story that you really care about, in some sense, it has to be a little bit about you, or it had to come from your experience or your research and you. And I really underestimated the bond that a writer has with their story. And so, when people, and, we create these things, we put them out on the internet and people stomp on them and destroy them, in reviews, or they alternatively love them and share them with friends. And it's a different kind of psychological thing. And I think it takes a little time to get used to. And I think I would tell my younger self to, just chill out or something.
and you would obviously listen to your younger self, but obviously completely listen to you as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like good advice. Okay, no problem. I'm chilling.
I like that. So some minute after it's, I'll chill out more.
Yeah. I'm not worried at all.
Epic advice, sir.
Yeah. I think that's all good advice, and I think you're absolutely right. I'm still just very impressed from early on in the interviews that that a lot of, not obviously very few of our listeners are at your level, but a lot of them are writers, and we all share kind of a common bond where, like I said, it's meaningful to you. This is stuff that, you feel like you're being judged, even if, somebody doesn't necessarily know you personally. There's always like one weird scene. You're like, oh my God, somebody's gonna read that scene and think I'm a psychopath. I can't believe I wrote that and I left it in. Maybe I'm just.
Oh, that scene turned you into a robot.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey,
robots are cool. I'm a robot.
We have not had the Scott Moon robot voice this episode. I'm kind of
Oh,
disappointed.
I just got it then.
Well, I'm jealous.
Robots for everyone. See, we always end with robots for everyone. We're getting pretty close, but
we are coming to the end of the hour, and it's been a great show. We've had some really interactive activity in the Facebook or the YouTube
live chat. Crazy as usual.
Oh, yeah, that's a hell of a scroll back on that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't been able to keep up with it as much. I apologize, but there's been some really good questions come out of our group today.
Jerry, I appreciate you taking the time out to come and hang out with us and talk about your books. Can you tell our audience where they could find out more about you and where they can find your books at?
Sure. Yeah. Go to agriddle.com. And yeah, obviously all the books are on Amazon. So that's probably the best place to check.
Awesome. As I said, it was great to have you on. Thank you so much for coming. Everybody that was hanging out with us in the live chat, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hang out with us here on live.
We have time for one more question.
Sure, go for it, Scott.
You want to do that? Well, it's from our chat group. That's the reason and I wanted to make sure I interrupted your exfiltration. I'm not even saying it right. I'm so dumb. But well, the question that just popped up right as you're reading that is from Corvo AZ. Corvo at AZ says, "What tropes annoy you, Jerry?" And you can say, "I don't want to answer that because the show's already over," or you can go ahead and answer it.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of tropes, and I try to. I'm probably guilty of every cliche you can imagine in my writing. I mean, and I don't know. I guess they're cliche or they're tropes for a reason because they kind of work. I mean,
Yeah.
like my heroes are like in the Atlantis anyway. It was the secret, the covert secret agent, and then the scientist working in a lab in obscurity, and and I got a lot of, and so like when I read novels, I probably. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I enjoy, and it's cliche, I guess, for a reason. But in Departure, I tried to create characters and situations that were maybe a little different. I mean, the hero is a venture capitalist. I mean, that's something I understood, and this is not something you common. I mean, that I don't think is a trope or a cliche, right? The venture capitalist hero or maybe it is.
Yeah, it's a nice twist. Well, it'll be a trope soon after this episode. Everybody's gonna be right. The venture capitalist trope.
Right, and the heroine, the girl was a biographer, ghostwriter, and so she was a writer, and that's something I kind of knew about too. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing that really comes to mind that I can't stand. But
so basically, good times all around. We're all de-stressing and not worrying about it. Time to read some books.
Trope me up.
Yeah, I didn't mean to trope you up there. So we probably do need to sign off. We have had several requests just to keep the show going forever, but that's impossible because eventually somebody has to eat.
If you do have questions, you can leave them in the video description below when the video is done being live, or you can ask them over at our Facebook group on Keystroke. On Facebook, if you search Keystroke Medium, there's a group and a page. Either one, you can send us questions, and we will attempt to get them answered for you if we missed your question today. For Ralph Kern and Scott Moon, I am Josh Hayes. We have been live with AG Riddle. Make sure you come back and hang out with us next week. We have Scott Bartlett, Rick Partlow, and Josh Dizelle coming in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you put that on your calendar, and it'll be a great time. So come back, hang out with us. We'll talk about some reading. We'll talk about some writing, and of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a great Monday.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
later, folks.